For years, I've been on the quest to find the perfect one bike solution, the do-it-all bike, the quiver killer, whatever you want to call it. It all started where all great bike conversations do, somewhere outside of Moab, Utah, on a bike in the middle of the night during what was then called the Rockwell Relay. And after riding an open upper with mullet gearing, a 42-tooth 1x chainring with a 1050 cassette, I was convinced I needed a 2x or a double chainring for this do-it-all bike idea to work. But maybe I was wrong. For the last 3 weeks, I've been riding the Colnago C68 gravel with the SRAM XPLR group, a group that I've messaged many of you about saying that it was probably the perfect 1x setup, bridging the gap between a mullet build and a 2x, at least on paper. See, until the C68, I'd never ridden the Explorer group, but now that I have, I might be a 1x convert. Let me explain why, propose a few considerations, and then I'll dive into which group I would get if I were buying a new gravel bike today. As always, this isn't a sponsored video. I don't even think that I'm on SRAM's radar. And if you've seen my other videos, I've actually been pretty critical of the performance of their group sets. If you're riding road or mountain, it's straightforward. 2x for road and 1x for mountain bikes. I know you can run a 1x for road and a 2x on a mountain bike, but I don't think it's optimal except for in rare situations. For the masses, 1x for mountain bikes, 2x for road. Considering gravel bikes land right in between, I think you should ask yourself the following questions before deciding on a group. How important is simplicity in your build? How important is weight? Is tire clearance for your frame a concern? Is gear spacing important? Do you plan to run a dropper post? Are you trying to keep the total build cost low? And what type of terrain do you plan to ride? The simplicity of a 1x drivetrain, namely removing the front derailleur, is going to save you quite a bit of tuning and adjusting headache. It might also save you a few chain drops along the way, depending on who you ask. SRAM's narrow, wide tooth chainring pattern keeps the chain in place over more technical terrain. Removing that front derailleur and second chainring are also going to save you quite a bit of weight. The typical 1x drivetrain is going to be around a ½ pound or a ¼ kilogram less than a comparable 2x drivetrain. If you want to maximize your tire clearance, 1x is going to allow you to take full advantage of your frame's clearance. A perfect example of this is my Specialized Crux. In the current 2x configuration, it maxes at around 43 or 44 millimeter tires, the battery on the front derailleur being the limiter. If I ran 1x, I could squeeze up to a 47 millimeter tire, maybe even a little more, depending on the wheel tire interface. 3 or 4 millimeters might not sound like a lot, but that extra 4 millimeters, in my opinion, changes the way the bike handles maneuvers, especially on rough or rocky terrain. And if you're like me, gear spacing is really important. One of the things that drove me nuts about the mullet gearing was that the jumps were just too big in between gears. Anytime I found myself on road, I was constantly shifting, trying to find the right gear to keep a steady power output and a comfortable cadence. If you plan to run a dropper post, especially with SRAM Access, you can utilize the left shifter to actuate the dropper post instead of adding additional equipment, keeping your front end looking clean and sharp. I think that's a big bonus for a 1x drivetrain. And on the note of aesthetics, do you think 1x or 2x looks cleaner? I'm kind of torn here, but I think 1x might look a little bit better. Drop me a comment below and let me know. Another big 1x advantage is that you don't have to deal with quite as many chain drops. Yes, I know there are those rare instances where you drop a chain with a 1x group set, but it's definitely not anywhere near the number of chain drops that you're going to get with a 2x group. Last but definitely not least, what type of terrain do you plan to ride? If you're riding steep, rough terrain, you're gonna want those ultra low gear ratios that the 1050 cassette offers, or at least you're gonna wanna go with something that's a 1:1 or greater gear ratio. If it's pancake flat where you live or you're riding fast, rolling hills, you might appreciate the tighter gear spacing and higher top end of a 2x drivetrain. At least that's what I thought. I was so convinced that this was necessary that I went to the other extreme of the spectrum for gravel, riding a 2x 50-37 chainring with a 1036 cassette on 43 millimeter tires. It was unlike anything that I've ever ridden. In the big ring on the 10 tooth, it seemed to have endless top end, more top end than I would ever need for gravel. So then I went down to the 48-35 and that's where I've landed, and I've been content until the C68 gravel arrived with the Explorer group. And after riding the Explorer group for 3 weeks, I can confidently say that not just on paper, but in reality, it's the perfect group for gravel. It has the simplicity and clean looks of a 1x drivetrain. It cuts down on weight and allows you to use your frame's full tire clearance potential. And the gear spacing is not only tolerable, but it's excellent on both ends. And if you wanted to fine tune this even more, you could pull up a gear ratio calculator and find the exact right chainring for your riding style. In my case, I'd go with the 44 tooth 1x chainring. I think that's the sweet spot that provides enough top in on flats and descents while still offering that 1-to-1 gear ratio for climbing. And if money were no object, I'd go with the red Explorer group, but I'd be completely content with saving a little bit of money and going with the Force Explorer group. And so for these reasons, I think I'm saying that I'm a 1x convert. That's not to say that I'm gonna ditch my current setup immediately, but if a new gravel bike were to come down the line soon, I'm moving to 1x Explorer, and I think it'll be great for my riding style. In the coming weeks, we'll talk helmets, shoes, indoor training on the Wahoo Kicker Move, and a whole lot more. Anyways, until next time.